All right. Today is Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. The time is now 3:37. I call this Housing Policy Committee meeting to order. I'll go ahead and start with the invocation, and then we will get started. Father God, we just come before you today just thanking you for this great time of meeting. We thank you that each and every presenter and the information that goes forth is beneficial to each and every hearer. We thank you for giving us wisdom and guidance and leading us into all truth and being here with us today. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Counselors, you have before you the minutes from our last meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right. And now we'll move on to presentation. So today we have with us Mr. Seth from the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District. And so glad that you could be here with us today. And he will be giving us some different presentations about what's going on with the Housing Authority. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You can.
Yeah, I was like,
It's fine. You're going to be here for a while.
right. You'll have to stand up.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to see everyone. So our present CEO, Dr. Foster, is actually out of town, accepting an award actually at a national conference or an annual conference for our regional association for advocacy. That actually an effort that we did with Councilor Quinn, the mayor and Congresswoman Sewell around access to Harris Homes and the Norfolk Southern Railway. So she sent her green, she couldn't be here, but I'm happy to be here for her to provide this presentation and answer whatever questions that you have. Obviously, thank you, Committee Chair, for the invitation. The Housing Authority counts the council and the city as a really close ally in all the work that we do, and so it's important to be able to come here and share information, to hear your concerns and your hopes for the city, and figure out how we can partner with the council on furthering the interests of the citizens of the city. So HABD, I just like to kind of set the table that we're a bit of an anomaly when it comes to public entities, that we're created by state legislation. We are accountable to a board of commissioners that's appointed by the mayor. We're also funded and regulated by HUD in DC, and so we have a lot of layers of accountability. We have a lot of friends, and so I'm grateful again to talk to friends about the work that we're doing and how we can move forward together. I'll start with probably the most prominent work that we are engaged in currently, which is the wholesale redevelopment of all of our public housing communities all across the city of Birmingham. It's a plan that we have right now pegged to run through 2035, but you know, that's everything about the plan until we have really a shovel in the ground is preliminary. So we're working to refine that and to really get started with all those redevelopment efforts. So outside the redevelopment though, I do want to note that our mission overall is to provide, yes, inclusive communities that are vibrant, but also to contribute to the wholeness of the families that we serve and serve as a catalyst for opportunity. So while we provide roofs, lots of roofs over people's heads, it's not the only thing that we do, although it is really the core of what we do. We are, just like most housing authorities across the country, known not only for public housing, but the Housing Choice Voucher Program, known as Section 8, and so we administer both of those programs here in the city of Birmingham. Over 4,000 units of public housing, over 6,100 vouchers. So all in all, we serve more than 20,000 residents of the city of Birmingham, which you would know is just a little bit more than 10% of the population of the city. Earlier this year, we hosted the council and staff for lunch, and so we went into detail really across the entire agency of our plans and operating kind of status. So I won't go into all that, but I do want to start talking about the current development efforts that are really underway, which the first one that I would mention is the one under construction, which is the redevelopment of the Southtown Core community. So right now going up is the family building, which will house 60 families when that's done construction. The senior building will house 120 families, I believe, and that one should close, the development hoping to close in late July or early August, and then construction would commence after that. We're working with the developer for the whole site to continue the plan for the entire site, and probably I could have a more detailed update for you probably in a couple of weeks about what we're going to do with the entire site. The other two sites I want to talk about today are Cooper Green and Collegeville. So on Cooper Green, we mentioned in January we're doing a substantial rehab. But on that site, we're not doing any off-site relocations, and so we'll rehab units as they become vacant, and so no one who's living there will have to leave the site because of construction. We plan to submit some required documents and application to HUD this year, along with a tax credit application to AHFA. And then the second one, like I said, I mentioned was Collegeville. So that site includes a transfer of about half the units. So Collegeville is a site of 394 apartments. About half of those are going to go to the former Ensley High School site redevelopment. The other half of those units, we haven't determined what's going to happen. Will we redevelop one site, or will we also look to move those to another site? I couldn't give you an answer to that, but those would be the two options. We either redevelop one site, obviously reducing density, removing half the units. And if you've been to that site, you know how it's cut. I won't say in the middle, but it's cut in the middle.
You're talking about college?
College, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was
Sure.
distracted making notes. What did you say the strategy was for that property?
So half the units will go to the
Ensley?
Ensley site, the Ensley project with Zimmerman, that's partnered with the city on Ensley. The other half is to be determined.
But nobody will return to that site.
I couldn't promise you that today.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't. So, when we look at that, just like for the, Southtown is we're not gonna have another project like Southtown. It's just not gonna happen. So most of the other sites will be their number one, a lot of times choice, preference is because of cost really, is to redevelop on site. But that's not always possible. Primarily, it could be site conditions, it could be environmental.
Yeah, I
could
thought
be
the
location,
environmental
just-
might be driving you to
Right.
not replace at that
Right.
location.
And so that is in that, so Collegeville and North
In that exact
Birmingham,
location.
those are real concerns. And so, like right now at Marks Village, we're doing some additional environmental assessments to determine what we're going to do. And so once we have the complete environmental assessment at the Collegeville site, we'll know if any of it's redevelopable or not.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's obviously, really kind of a very public condition to that site, in that part of Birmingham, a lot of Birmingham really, but that part of Birmingham.
Yeah, I would just say be careful because, I was on the school board when we built a new school right next door to it, and it was, I think because a school had been there and they were not acquiring new property, typically if you're buying new property, you would definitely do the phase 1, phase 2, but somehow the program manager didn't think to do a phase 1 and phase 2, and we actually built a new school for children to go outside and play on grounds that had high levels of arsenic contamination, stuff like that. So it was just not a good scene, and we did that. So I would just say they did get it remediated, and anyway.
One thing I'll ask is, I know you talked about how half of the 394 apartments would be moved to the Ensley apartments, and right now you wouldn't be able to say whether or not they would come back to that site or not, correct?
Those will be a permanent relocation of the subsidized units. So what will happen in the process is every resident will have the option. You can go for one of the new units. You can get a voucher instead of moving, or you can transfer to another public housing unit. So every resident there will have that option. So the residents will determine what they want to do. Now, if we have more families that want to go to the Ensley site, then we have units, then we would have to determine how we would allocate that and things of that nature. But we had the same concern really with Southtown, and we have some excess units, but not enough And so because of the bedroom size, and so, but as time goes on, people make different decisions. And so for Ensley, I don't think occupancy is going to be, I don't know, for another 3 years, 4 years. I'm not really sure what the schedule is, but people will have a lot of time to make an initial decision, change their mind, and so they'll have the option to determine what they want to do.
Got you. And I'm just thinking about the impact that it would have on the school, because
On the
majority of
school,
those
yeah.
kids that go to Hudson K through 8 live in the Collegeville Housing Authority, and so.
So when we were, I'm intimate. Actually, Councilor Quinn and I are both intimate with Southtown Master Planning, but we did engage the school system a lot. They were on the steering committee for the master planning, and the housing authority was very big on providing residents choices. So most of them chose to take a voucher
They did.
and, take their chance on the open rental market. And so, that was just that seems to be a popular choice.
It is. I will
And
say every time I
I'll just
see-
give you that warning, but.
Every time I see Dr. Sullivan, he talks about Southtown and those families that aren't there anymore. And so, because the school district, they have to plan not just for September or August, but for next year and next year and next year, So it is, we have to keep, just like we communicate with the council, we have to communicate with the city schools and involve them in the planning so they know what we're doing. But also that could mean, there's kind of endless opportunity almost for collaboration. And so ideally it works out for everybody, but at the end of the day, we do have to figure out how do we provide quality affordable housing to our residents. When they decide that they prefer a voucher, that's what they get. But we still have those hard units that are subsidized at the Ensley project. And so while it might not be occupied by a current Collegeville resident, another resident of the city of Birmingham will have an opportunity to have affordable housing, subsidized housing, permanently subsidized affordable housing. So.
Gotcha.
So the crown jewel, obviously, of our development plans is the Smithfield Court CNI application, which, we, again, really successful in ongoing collaboration with the city of Birmingham as they're our co-applicant. We had our site visit last month from HUD. It was a great time. Again, thankful for the support of the counselors for that event. And we hope to hear some really good news in the next couple of weeks about that project. I don't need to tell anybody here about how that will be a game changer for the city, for Smithfield, for Green Mountain, College Hills. And so we're really excited about that opportunity. And I was telling Councilor Plum yesterday, I try not to think about it. I try not to talk about it because I just get really nervous when I do. So I'm just leaving it at that. If you have questions about Smithfield, we can talk about that. But I do want to transition and talk a little bit about our people, which are our residents. I talked about the 20,000 people that we serve earlier. And so summer at HABD means SYEP, which is the Summer Youth Employment Program. We have right now about 130 youth who are serving as peer counselors in our summer camp, again, across our 11 public housing communities. And we had this year, for the first time, a really generous partnership with the State Department of Human Resources. They provided us over $900,000 to pay the salaries of these youth. They make $12 an hour. So we're really excited about that opportunity and the ongoing partnership with the state DHR to benefit our residents, to provide resources. And so we're really excited about that. The camp began June 12th and it runs through July 21st. After that, we'll still have programming for the kids between then and when school starts, including SCLC is doing a mentoring camp. There is, we do a really big book bag giveaway and other activities for the kids at the various sites of the community centers. One of the things that we talked about in January as well that I like to follow up on is on home ownership. And so on July 15th, which is a Saturday, at the Harbor Center, we're having a home buyer education workshop, and that goes from 9 o'clock a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. So there'll actually be a wide range of resources and education for the families that attend, and obviously financial literacy, but also building strong credit profiles, how to choose a real estate professional, fair housing, working with lending partners, and other topics. So we're really excited about that. We have a range of partners from, again, the city of Birmingham on some down payment assistance, Urban League, lots of others that are working with us to pour resources into our family. So we're excited about that.
And what day did you say that was again?
July 15th.
July 15th at the Harbor Center.
Right.
And that's, is that gonna be tailored to, with HABD residents kind of in mind?
Correct. So we're focused really mostly on the HCV homeownership program. So you can use your voucher to buy a home.
I'm sorry.
That was one of my questions, so I'm so
HCV?
excited.
Housing choice voucher, essentially.
Okay, gotcha.
Sure. But in addition to that, we also currently today have 11, we'll get that right, the vacant homes that we also talked about last time, Mason City, Fountain Heights, and Tuxedo, that we're looking to sell to. So in the public housing program, you can have single family homes that are socialized in public. So it's not just apartment communities. So we have a bunch of those. And we can sell those to public housing residents. And so that's what our plan is. And so that's why we're hoping to get a good number of public housing residents to come to the homeowners, the home buyer education workshop to learn about the steps they would need to take to purchase those homes.
So wait, well,
Go
Chair,
ahead.
I can go first.
You're the chair.
No, so are these houses that you all have purchased, or how did you acquire these?
So long before my time, I would imagine some that we purchased, some were gifted to us probably.
Yeah.
Well, Fountain Heights you developed.
And I
The
was
city
gonna say,
bought the city bought the lots. I bought the lots.
okay. And then there are a few that, a very small minority that we developed ourselves.
Gotcha.
And then Tuxedo was part of your
Yes.
Hope 6.
Right, so we built 19 single-family homes at Tuxedo as part of the renovation for that site. Some of those are occupied in residents who are in like a kind of lease-to-own program. So, but then we have a number of ones that are vacant, but also some of them that are occupied, the current resident isn't interested in purchasing. And so that allows us an additional purchase opportunity. So those families will have to have a relocation plan and move to a different unit, either at Tuxedo or elsewhere. But those homes will all be sold to public housing residents.
I guess my question was, is HABD, do they have the appetite to acquire other single-family homes for that same type of?
Yeah, a strong appetite, I would say. So our new, I don't know if he's new anymore, VP of Special Initiatives, Kelly Gamble, he heads up our efforts on acquisition and redevelopment. So we have a number of opportunities to do that, both houses, land, like we talked about with Fountain Heights, to develop homes specifically for home ownership. We're not going to build houses to rent. We're going to build, if we build single-family homes, it's going to be to sell. Depending on how we finance it, it may have to go to be sold to public housing residents. Otherwise, it could be open for anybody who meets income criteria and can afford the home.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's helpful and good to know. Council Clark.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask, so this is how you're sort of piloting the Section 8 homeownership program in your agency? Because I don't know, have you done them previously?
Yeah, so we have about 16 right now.
Okay.
And so we have, just like we talked about appetite for a person and developing single family homes, we have a huge appetite for fostering home ownership in our families. And so we took a hiatus a couple of, maybe 18 months ago on that program.
Okay.
And so this is kind of getting it restarted, reintroducing our families to it and providing that opportunity.
So do you have lenders who are working, specific lenders who are working with you on this program?
Yes, the last purchase that we had went through Regions, but we've done Regions and Renaissance and a number of other banks through the homeownership program. Banks, we have a number of banks who, they like it and they're willing to work, because one of the things that's not traditional is, as the bank, you're going to get a payment from the homeowner, and you're also going to get a payment from us every month. And not every bank can, most banks aren't used to that. And so some banks are willing to figure it out when they're in, and I'm sure there are some banks who wouldn't be interested in that. But it is a great program. It's particularly advantageous for the elderly and disabled. Otherwise, because it's a 15-year program for somebody like myself. But if you're elderly and disabled, it just goes for the term.
Yeah, so, just to help educate us, the way the voucher program works currently, and feel free to jump in and correct me wherever necessary, is that it's not uniform in that each recipient is kind of evaluated relative to what their income is. So it's not just a uniform, I'm just going to pick a number, $500 per family. It's really appropriate to that person's situation. And so in the context of this home ownership, rather than their rent in a conventional public housing community, rather than that family paying rent to HABD, they would be paying a portion of their mortgage to the bank, and HABD would be subsidizing that payment as is appropriate to relative to that family's income.
Correct. And that's how there's exactly how it happens. I don't have anything to add.
I mean, I think he just gave us a call to action to the banks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we, yes, I agree. I said that. So not the last thing, I think it's the second, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, the regular market has a supply issue, but it's
Yes.
nice that you all have a supply.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you can get people ready to buy houses and then there's no houses for them to buy. So the fact that you have a supply, you have some inventory
Right.
that you can match your people to is really awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just add to that, I just think it's awesome that you guys have Kelly Gamble over there now, because, really what you're talking about makes me think about what Woodlawn United is trying to do over there in the Woodlawn community. I can envision HABD sort of playing the same role, but with a much larger geography.
So our former chair, Dr. Anthony C. Hood, introduced myself and President Foster and Mr. Gamble, not to say, hey, hire this guy, but hey, this is a guy who knows Birmingham, knows housing, just somebody you should talk to. And so when she and I met with them and then had subsequent conversations, we just immediately knew what an asset he would be to the housing authority because of where we're trying to go in terms of providing opportunities for both our residents and just the city of Birmingham in general. And so that's exactly what, we have to build our way there, build capacity, build experience, get our name out there. But that's exactly, where we're going and where we're going to get to. And so I'm just excited about that too. Now that I can talk about this.
Yeah.
I get all choked up, but I can talk about this whole stuff.
Yeah, and your, your charter is so right for that. So, the housing authority is also a redevelopment authority by charter. And so they have all these great powers that other people would have to come to the city for. Y'all have them for providing housing. So, you're well equipped charter-wise. I do think, to get where you need to go in resetting your portfolio, we've just got to have some more incentives because the gaps are going to kill you.
Oh, yes.
They're going to kill your deal flow.
Yes.
And so that's probably another conversation for another day, but there's some legislation they've been pushing for that would sort of beef up the Alabama Housing Finance Authority's housing bond program so that deals could actually pencil, because right now those deals don't work. And so all of those deals will be looking to the city or HABD to close those gaps. And You might could do it for one here and there, but you won't be able to do it for a series of projects like they're gonna have. And so I think we gotta work on getting those legislative tools in place.
Absolutely.
Um,
And figure out a way, you know, one of the challenging things is that Alabama's a big state. It's not really a state that is, I guess let's say the urban areas don't run the state like you might in other places.
Right.
Okay? And so,
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah.
so when we talk about kind of, you know, there's different versions of different definitions of equity. And so you have all these competing interests, and so that becomes, even with the way we do tax credits in the state now, becomes an issue, because it's great that it, you know, we spread this equity across the state, but there's pros and cons to that approach. There's going to be pros and cons to any approach, and so just figuring out, you know, what are the ways that we can ensure that it's most helpful. You know, like anybody else would do, you advocate for yourself. And so we, with the city, with other partners in the private sector, really need to kind of come together and have strong advocacy and really make things work, get some real wins. And so we're looking forward to having a meeting tomorrow, actually, with some folks planning about how we're going to engage leading up to the next legislative session. So I'm really excited about kind of laying the groundwork and having conversations and putting things in motion.
Do you all have a state lobbyist? I'm sorry, I keep butting in.
We do, Rick Jones.
Okay. Dang, I was hoping it was somebody different, not because I have a problem with him, it's just he's ours too. And I was thinking, well, if we get our lobbyists and we get your lobbyists, and we get Navigate to get their lobbyists,
Right.
you know, all saying the same thing, but he works for everybody.
That just must mean he's effective, right?
Yeah.
So I have two more things I want to talk about before I let you guys do what you want to do with me. The first thing is safety, which is really important, and that's been important since, you know, I've almost been here 2 years, and right before I got here is when we committed to spend millions of dollars on upgrading security and surveillance technology on our sites, which we've done, which we continue to do. We also have a contract with UPD to provide above baseline services, which means we have dedicated officers and supervisors for public housing communities. That helps with prevention, their presence, but also responses when those are needed. We continue to engage with those partners, law enforcement, but also with our residents about what their hopes are, what their fears and concerns are as well for safety and what they want to see in their communities to enhance safety. We have a series right now that's ongoing called Conversations Over Pizza, where we bring BPD into our communities with our residents and have kind of, we get around the table, there's several tables, get around the table, have discussions about how we can partner together. And a lot of times, it goes back to what are the opportunities available for folks, but also how do we, realistically, our sites, again, I talked about governments and how we're, technically public, but it's private property. And so how do we ensure that only people who should be, either who live or who guess people who live at our sites, are there, and how we kind of control access, which is very hard because most of our sites are set just on the city grid, And so, like at Reverend Dr. Moran Homes, we've installed some barriers recently to constrict the flow of traffic. We talked about this, which we did at Mark Homes a number of years ago, which just funnels traffic to certain major thoroughfares, which makes monitoring that traffic a little bit easier. We have a very sophisticated license plate reader system. I can go right now and tell you every red car, every red truck that drove through one of our sites. I can give you 2 license plate numbers, I can find every car with those. So it's very sophisticated, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done, but we're constantly doing that, and we pay a lot of attention to that. We're expanding our public safety team right now. It's really 1 person. We're in the midst of hiring a 2nd person to assist and support in those efforts, and thinking about other ways to enhance how we ensure the safety of our residents. Which really, I was reading something really interesting the other day about a case study in Pittsburgh, and I've never thought about this, but at least in this case study, the public housing residents didn't know anything about crime in terms of how they felt safe, but where are they sending their kids to school and what recreation options they have, what's the quality of those amenities in the neighborhood, and that contributes also to safety, which goes to talk about how we can do redevelopment the right way to enhance not just the quality of the homes, but also the entire community, which goes back to the Smithfield choice, which is really the prototype, is really the best we're going to be able to do. And so how also can we replicate that in maybe small ways, or take certain pieces or leverage the resources that are there across the city, and that's going to be an ongoing project for the housing authority.
Well, I do want to, commend you all for what you're doing, especially, putting up the barriers in Morrell Tire Homes. I know that it has definitely cut down on a lot of the traffic, but, or in addition to that, I wanted to make sure that you were aware and possibly send someone from your team as well. Lighthouse Ministries is doing a conversation tonight at 6:30 p.m. With residents, Pastor Holt at Lighthouse, Veronica Johnson, who is a minister there as well. They're having conversations with residents about, how to work hand in hand with you all, as well as BPD, city, everybody, to come up with strategies of their own of how they can play a part in creating a safer community. I know some of the, ideas that, were shared, was like, man, it would be nice if we had like a check-in where, people had to actually have their driver's license to prove that they actually lived here, instead of just allowing people to just flow in freely. And so I definitely think it would be beneficial for you all to have somebody be in attendance, to be a part of those conversations. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, we get lots of suggestions. Some are Collegeville, we talk about Collegeville. On that site, those are our streets on that site. So those are city streets versus outside, those are city streets. And so that's why at Collegeville and North Birmingham, we can put up a gate around the whole site. And we have controlled access with a 24/7 security guard at those gatehouse where people kind of drive in and drive out. But then at, Morrell Tide or Marks Village, we have to collaborate with the city to make sure that we have access for, emergency responders and approval from all of the, different departments of the city to go forward. But I can tell you without a doubt, the city is a great partner in that effort. BPD is a great partner in that effort. We have right now ongoing heightened police presence at that site and some of the other ones. And so we just have to continue to evaluate what we're doing, continue to partner and listen to the residents, and continue to work with folks like Lighthouse and other community resources that are willing to do the work to help come up with solutions to the issues.
Gotcha.
So the very last thing on my list is what's the impact of some of the federal stuff that's going on, HABD. So I talked about how we're funded and regulated by the federal government. So we're in depends on who you ask, the middle, beginning of the federal appropriation season. And so what that means is at the end of the day, probably towards the end of this calendar year, there will be a bill that funds the entire government, which includes money that comes directly to public housing authorities. This year, our fiscal year is going to go with y'all in the city, and so we are expecting $100 million from HUD this year. That's vouchers, that's public housing. And it's really hard to say what the final bill is going to be, but even if, and kind of the best possible outcome is funding at the caps that, if you paid attention, that Congress and the White House agreed to a couple of weeks ago. That seems to be the best possible solution. That would even be even though it might not be a real dollar cut, depends on the formulas, it would be a proration to us because our funding is, like I just said, calculated on the formula.
Yeah.
And so the needs go up just because there's inflation, because fluctuation in energy costs is a big driver, especially in public housing. And so that could have a really adverse effect on just our operations, how much maintenance we're able to do, and how much capital planning also we're able to do down the line, because all that funding comes from the federal government. So we're advocating with our senators, with Congressman Sewell, to try to, push as much as we can towards the relevant HUD accounts so that we can get the funding that we need for the next year.
Yeah, when, I was just
Okay.
thinking, when he threw out that number, I was thinking, well, is that good or bad? Because I had no, but that's a proration for you. About what percent do you think? I mean,
So what we're projecting that we get 95% of what we're due. That's the $100 million. So so we just have to see what the funding comes out to. So both the House and Senate kind of released a budget blueprint. The House, which is controlled by Republicans, reduces funding drastically, which would, I mean, we might be down to 90% or lower. When we had sequestration, when President Obama was in office, there was, I mean, it was devastating for the entire industry. We're talking about layoffs, and we didn't have to kind of take back vouchers, so nobody lost their housing, but most PhDs had to stop issuing vouchers and stop doing some of the creative things that we're talking about, which also kind of goes in hand with the resource development that we need to do to really advance the agenda that we have. We can't rely just on the federal funding, because it's reliable, but from year to year, you don't know what's going to happen. And so just keep your eye open for that, and just if you have any further questions about that as things kind of shape out and as bills come to the committees and things in Congress, we'll put out more information just as FYI.
Okay.
I know his mind is ticking because he lobbies effectively in the federal space. That's all I have to say.
Right. So I'll take it. If you say so.
I'm also noting that you're not talking about the state of Alabama, so the omission is very loud to my ears. So
Yeah.
I would assume $0 from the state of Alabama.
Correct. We're lucky we don't owe anything.
Wow.
But no, yeah, 0. And, that's, I think longer term, that's an opportunity for us. So we don't have a really good history of engaging with the state. We'll take responsibility for that. And so now, we're kind of turning the ship. And so we're starting with what kind of looks like low-hanging fruit. So the federal government has sent billions of dollars to Alabama for stuff like, just as an example, broadband expansion and support. And so ensuring that we can have access to those dollars, some of the energy efficiency dollars that are going to come through the state as well, making sure we have access to that as we're talking about our redevelopment, because we're eligible for rebates or other funding, grant funding potentially to reduce the energy consumption of the folks on our sites. And so we really have a sharp focus on that, and we're working to really solidify the relationships both directly with the state, but also who are the folks that they kind of listen to or rely on, and how can we partner with them to kind of have a multi-pronged approach to our engagement with the state.
Okay.
Can I ask him something about that?
Yes, ma'am. Councilor Clark.
Would becoming a direct issuer of bonds be one of those things?
It would.
Yeah.
So, and tomorrow is, the number one thing on the agenda tomorrow is laying out that strategy.
Okay.
That's going to be really important, but also it's going to be another thing where I talked about earlier about developing the capacity. I have the Atlanta Housing Authority is kind of in the same, they're actually further along than we are, but then you have all the kind of mechanics of what that looks like and how you do that effectively. And so we have to not only work with the state to be able to do that, but also work to kind of have the infrastructure to do it successfully.
Yeah, and I just think in terms of getting multifamily, affordable multifamily production, y'all are going to be the key, because it's such a hard environment to finance deals in. To private developers will be coming to you trying to get
Absolutely.
bond issues too for housing. So I just think anything we can do to help them get in position to. Because the private activity bonds come to the allocation comes to the state, but it has not been, a portion of it has gone to Alabama Housing Finance to do the bond programs they do, but the rest of it's been allocated to industrial development boards across the state, And it's just kind of wasted capacity because IDBs haven't issued bonds since like the 80s,
IBBs.
Industrial Development Boards.
Gotcha.
So it's just a kind of a disconnect at the state as it relates to supporting affordable housing that, so there's the capacity is there. It's just allocated to the wrong stuff. So I think that's kind of, and it's not, I think the people who've been working on legislation to create, now when the previous director of HABD started initiating conversations with the state about creating a 4% tax credit that would be funded by the state through the private activity bonds, and it would be a companion to close the gap on these low-income housing tax credit deals. Anyway, a group of affordable housing developers across the state, and they put up the money. I think their association, I don't know if it's these people, but anyway, an association put up money for lobbying. Paul Compton and through Zimmerman and others, they kind of initiated because they came in to do Inslee, and they were going to be in that same, 25% gap situation early on. But anyway, one of the problems they had in Montgomery this year is that it's not an elevator pitch. You can't explain to anybody. So we really need to start now help supporting them and socializing it. And then Alabama Housing Finance Authority is supportive, but they can't lobby. So they can only answer questions when they are asked by legislators, to give them a briefing. So they can brief people on the facts and the mechanics, but they can't go and just pitch it. So anyway, that's just what I've been told as I've asked around, like, well, how's it doing? Where is it? Because I think for the kind of deal flow y'all are talking about having, it's just going to be imperative that we have the tools that other states have that make the deals work.
Right.
And we have the same capacity, the same private activity bond capacity they have. Ours is just, the allocation was set by a committee, and I think they decided the percentages. This is my take on it. They decided the percentages a long time ago, and they've never looked at it again. And nobody's ever looked at it again. It's just, it's just not, because the guy who was doing some of the legwork for Zimmerman, he had to just go and dig this up and find who's this committee that who decides the allocation, and he found them, but it's just this committee that probably never meets. Yeah, so
some fun work.
set it and forget it. But anyway, so there's a group working on that. So as governmental affairs for the council, Clinton Woods and I met with them a couple of times. They told us to lay low as Birmingham because they didn't want it to look like a Birmingham thing, which can be a factor in Montgomery. Mm-hmm. But so we laid low. Then they came back to us kind of at the end of the session and says, we got to talk to people. Y'all got to help us talk to people about this because they just can't, it's just too hard to get people to understand it quickly. And some of our seniors are some of our senators are getting, that's Freudian, need more time. That's all. More lentils. But,
Okay.
yeah, so there's some good groundwork done already. We just have to help socialize it and get people to understand it.
All right. Councilor Quinn, did you have anything else?
I'm glad to hear about the sort of wraparound approach that HABD is taking. Definitely, over the years, have seen that sort of increase with like the Campus of Hope at Marks Village. I think that's also important that there's a lot of other entities that you guys partner with that want to be working with folks who live in those public housing communities. I mean, even doing things like what Councilor Moore mentioned, at the meeting tonight. So it's one of those things where, HABD seems to be very open to, collaborations with folks who are having impact in the community. So that's good. Can you
Talk about it.
speak at all to the high cop program and, just for context,
Sure.
we only know what folks tell us,
Okay.
and oftentimes, folks aren't volunteering information. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate.
Yeah, so, and making it even more difficult is the policy that counselors are very discouraged from engaging with city staff directly. So I'm asking you, from a HABD perspective, how is the high cop program working?
So, the same challenges that BPD has kind of writ large impact their partnership with us. So, in terms of staffing is really number one. So, they are, really trying to so in the contract that we currently have, we were allotted up to, I think, 14 officers, but it's been really hard for them to reach that maximum, right? And so now we're looking at, okay, well, how do we right-size the contract to ensure that what we're paying is adequate for what we're getting, we're not overpaying, but then also, how do we add capacity to have an on-site presence of law enforcement? And so we're going through a process now to evaluate kind of what our options are, working with the BPD to ensure that they are aware of and working with us to kind of sketch these things out. But so I would say one of the things that's great is they are 100% dedicated to a alternative kind of policing method. It's not, I can't really speak to what they do in Birmingham, right? But I know for us, they're really focused on, this is not just policing, but this is us being accessible, it's us being present, it's us being helpful and forming relationships. They're very intent on forming relationships, providing, we do, lots of events during the year, obviously all the big holidays and things of that nature, but not only are they there as a police presence, but also participating. And so it's a really productive and beneficial relationship. And we, so it's just a matter of how do we ensure that whatever they're able to support us in terms of manpower, if it's not what we think is adequate, what are the options for us to supplement that? This is at great expense. It's not between the security system I talked about and the money we pay for BPD. It's millions of dollars a year. And I won't say that, you can't put a price on safety or something like that, but we have to be good stewards of the resources that we have because they're finite. And we have a responsibility, like I said, our formation moves over people's heads and all that stuff. We still got to pay electricity and water and, the list goes on. So we're trying to figure out what that balance is. But between the police department and Chief Smiley from the mayor's staff, they are really open and there's a real good spirit of collaboration.
Okay.
And so that's what I would kind of say is the current status.
Yeah, so what I heard in that is that HABD is also impacted with what we observe, just in the broader community, and that, what we desire to have in terms of law enforcement presence, HABD is also experiencing the same sorts of challenge.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And, you know, with the emphasis on the police department is we're constantly communicating and collaborating about how we utilize those resources that they have available. You know, their goal isn't to kind of, you know, pull back on resources either for HABD or for the city. And so they've got, which I remember at the campus of Hope, we have an officer there. And I was talking to him one time about, you know, what he thinks about recruiting and how to get more people involved and interested in that line of work. And he was just, you know, laying out the challenges. And I was like, wow, I see how it's just going to be, unless something really shifts. And I'm not an expert on this, okay? I did study criminal justice in undergrad, but I'm not an expert by any means. But until something really changes culturally, you know, that line of work is just going to have certain baggage. So that's really at the end of the day, I think, from an outsider's view, what the challenge is. And I know that the city and the mayor have been really, you know, committed to figuring out what are the right incentives for both hiring but also retention. You've got a lot of police departments in this region. So, you know, the real issues that would solve all of our issues are larger than how certain way larger than
Right.
Regional police department.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, can we talk a little bit more, or how are we doing on time?
So I think we have what?
We're not about an hour.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more.
So this is more of a philosophical question. You know, we talk about community policing, and to me, that means having residents and, you know, citizens, people in the community engaged in trying to deter criminal activity. HABD obviously has some assets and resources. Is there any thought to leveraging those assets and resources to leverage folks to be involved in community policing?
Yeah, I would say I took about conversations over pieces, really like a first step, really opening the door to that kind of engagement between the residents and the officers. And then the next step is, okay, we at least have conversations going about how do we then form relationships? How do we then have partners come in to support those efforts? We get, you know, lots of organizations do, you know, events or stuff like that. Reverend Tide does several peace walks a year at our sites, and others do similar activities. And so there's not necessarily a shortage of that, but how do we make sure that the efforts are actually making a difference and that they're sustainable? But also that we, you know, the one thing is that particularly the violent crime that happens on our properties is not committed, and oftentimes our residents aren't either the offender or the victim, right? And so I talked about access before, but then the next question is, okay, well, how do we utilize our resources to impact or leverage other resources to impact the actual individuals who are involved in those criminal activities? And that's really where we have to lean very hard on other partners, because as you know, the federal government is very serious about what its money is used for. And you know, nobody would like to hear that we're using the federal dollars that we get, you know, on programs that are aimed at people who we don't assist. So that's a bright line that we can't cross. So that's why the collaborations are really important. So we can bring people to the table, around the table, have these conversations. And I think that's what we'll continue to do and kind of build on step by step by step. That's why I talked about bringing somebody on board, or hiring somebody to assist our Director of Public Safety, and that's really going to be want to focus I don't want to say too much about the candidate, but the one that we're looking at, he has a deep history of community involvement, law enforcement involvement, working with religious institutions and things of that nature. So he doesn't have I see somebody loitering, let me just lock him up. He's all about creating and security. We have to also spend money and invest in human resources and people and personnel to kind of, build these programs and sustain them.
Yeah, I know it's hard. I mean, you touched on this briefly. There's a lot. This is a huge issue, right? And from a ecosystem perspective, these communities weren't designed to be healthy. So using Smithfield Court and the Choice neighborhood community, that's more of what we aspire to in terms of it being designed to be a healthy ecosystem that has all of the components that's actually going to nurture the people who live in it.
So you said something and it brought up two thoughts, and I'm gonna share that, and then I'm gonna pass it over to Councilor Clark, and then we'll close out. You talked about the violent crimes. I know when we got a chance to go out to Morrell Todd and knock on doors and just talk to residents, one thing that we were telling them is like, hey, we're just checking in, just checking up on you, just trying to see how everything is going. How are you as an individual doing? And a lot of people appreciated it because they were like, man, nobody has, asked us that, or, nobody has, just checked in, and trying to figure out if there's, one, is there something that you all have in place to just engage people around, just trauma, when different things happen? Is there a process or a plan in place that you all have to engage folks and just kind of check in with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have, I couldn't give you the name of the organization, but an entity here in Birmingham that when we have family who is a victim, witnesses, violent act or anything like that, or just wants it, can get free counseling to deal with those issues, to kind of begin that process of confronting and dealing with the trauma, from a professional standpoint. We also have, just as an ongoing basis, lots of partners, everything from UAB on the large side to smaller community-focused entities that engage with our residents. We have, I probably have 10 pages of just a list of the organizations that we have MOUs with that work with our residents and do programming, not just at the Campus of Hope, but replicating on a small scale that model at our other sites. And so that's something that we absolutely do, and we're fortunate to have lots of organizations that want to partner with us for the benefit of the residents.
Awesome, awesome. I know. So another thing you had said too, you made mention of investing in human resources, right? Because we can invest in cameras, we have BPD to come out, but also thinking about how can we invest in people. One of the things that I've really been trying to figure out how to make work is the model that Cap Downtown has, where they have individuals that ride around on bikes in the business district to service those businesses, and ensure that folks are if you got a flat tire, or if you need directions, or whatever the case may be, like they are there and available for people as a resource to them. And from what I've seen, it's been very helpful because a lot of people see them as just that, a resource. And they build the relationships with folks in those areas to the point to where folks know them by name and they're familiar with them. The challenge in, putting something like that in a residential space is, the cost associated with it, because you have a condensed area of businesses that are able to, pay into that type of support or that type of service. Would that be something that, you know, you all would be able to use funding towards to be able to have like a cap downtown type of model where you have individuals who are boots on the ground, able to, you know, build those relationships and, you know, kind of serve as, you know, your good, friendly neighborhood.
While you're at it, can you get us some park rangers?
Like, but yeah, like, would that be something that, you know, you all would be open to looking into?
Yeah, so we have at our community centers, each of our sites has a community center, the community centers have staff. And so they have a mix of like that kind of role, but also doing programming in the centers. Obviously, they spend a lot of their focus on after school activities with the youth. So the kids get out of school, they get off the bus, they go into the center.
Right.
And trying to, you know, keep them occupied for a couple hours before they go home. But we've been looking at kind of our model of that, of those client services and how we can reformat that to be more engaging, to be more in the face of the residents versus, it's great, you would think, I shouldn't say you would think. It seems perfect to have a community center and staff located on, you know, the site where you live. But that's not always enough. You know, people have a lot going on. They may or may not have young kids, they may or not work, they might have an elderly person they're caring for or being an elderly person. So even though it might only be a couple-minute walk, it's not necessarily convenient at all times to go over and start those relationships. So we do two things. One, when we have people move into our properties, we engage them at that point, we do a needs assessment, and we try to connect them with resources. But we have to follow up. And then two, like I said, we're trying to figure out how to be more engaged on a daily basis. We have one full-time and a part-time staff, and some sites have real part-time. So when I say part-time, I'm talking like 30 hours a week. But then some sites have somebody who works like 4 hours a day to just as an additional help. And so making sure those people are properly equipped. And really, our model used to be, this is before I got here, it really used to be the centers are all about sports. And so if you're going to work in the center, the history of most of the people were athletic coaches for youth. But we have youth are a big part of the population that we serve, but they're not the whole part. And so we've got to be, like I talked about before, concerned with the entire family and making sure we have people who are equipped to either connect with resources or do coaching, financial coaching and things of that nature at the site. And it's not only athletics. So it's something that's ongoing. Right. I would like to say we're in the middle of it, but we're somewhere.
Gotcha. Council Clark.
I just had a couple of questions. One is about porting vouchers,
Sure.
and I know I've got a neighborhood president here, so I've been trying to think of why is he here and what can I ask that he's most interested in. I'm reading his mind, so I could be getting it wrong,
Okay.
right? But he's from Bellevue Heights, which is a neighborhood on the western edge of Birmingham, very beautiful historic neighborhood that borders Fairfield. And I learned when I was canvassing to run for this office that a lot of the residents are from the Fairfield Housing Authority, and they have vouchers in Birmingham. So if you know there are problems from those households, I can't call Kanji Drake and say, hey, can you go inspect those units? Like, I heard stories from the residents like, okay, the grandmother's on the lease, but the grandson is really the only one living there, and all his friends come there. Yeah. Okay, so these are people who know each other because they're all from the same housing authority in a neighboring jurisdiction. And so those vouchers didn't get ported properly, I don't suppose. And then, so I guess my question of you is, should any voucher holder who lives in Birmingham, is it okay for them to have a voucher from Bessemer or from Fairfield, or should they convert that to a Birmingham voucher? I'm just asking, because I don't know.
Question. So there's not a lot of people who know. That's the weird thing about one peculiarity about Alabama. And this is something that PHAs across the state face because there's a lot of PHAs that have jurisdictions that are really close to one another. I won't say overlap because that's not the issue here. So traditionally, you should be porting between Fairfield, Birmingham, Jefferson County, Bessemer. That's what you should be doing. Here, we've developed over many years, I couldn't tell you when it
It's a
started.
culture.
We don't do that. And so Fairfield, Bessemer, Jefferson County, Birmingham, we all have the same kind of countywide jurisdiction. And it's an informal.
Oh, really?
It's an informal arrangement. It's something that we and other PhDs kind of talk to HUD about, and they're like, well, it's kind of a local issue. If y'all have determined to do that, you're able to do that. But you know how you go about doing that. You know, it's really a gray area. HUD doesn't have a hard and fast rule about that. They don't decide what our jurisdiction is. The state doesn't. So if the state says we can operate in the whole county, we can do it. If the state says we can operate in Shelby County, we can do that.
I thought you were limited so many miles like that.
Yeah,
mean-
that's what the statute says, right?
Okay.
That's what the statute says.
You can only go so far outside of the Birmingham city limits?
That's what the statute says.
Okay.
You know, so when I got here, we administer vouchers anywhere in Jefferson County.
Okay. See, that clears it up for me. Okay, so that will go off of my soapbox. Okay, scratch that. The other thing that I'm a big fan of, because I've seen it in action and what it can do, is the escrow accounts that you all have for residents. And I feel like, you know, when I was working at Corporate Realty on Southtown, you know, we were tasked with creating economic opportunities for residents. And one of the things, you know, we're working with the Alabama Workforce Training Center and providing lunches for any residents who went down there to get the construction training or the OSHA 10 or whatever. So a lot of them were like, do I have to get paid, you know, will I get paid, you know, under the table for this? And they're like, no, you know, like if they get a job. And because their mother is concerned about them messing up their eligibility and this, that, and the other. So I don't feel like the escrow accounts are being socialized very much within the culture of HAPD, because the way they work is if you sign up for the self-sufficiency and your income goes up, the increased rent goes into an account that you can use, but you use it to move out of public housing. So I've seen, I think it was before you came, but I've seen them present really large checks to residents who are moving out of public housing. And I just think if people knew, like, you know, it doesn't have to just go to rent, it can go into a savings account for me, that delta. I mean, is there an administrative challenge with that program or something?
That's probably the best way to put it. So that program is, it's called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and the coordinators that we have on staff are funded through a grant from HUD.
Oh, I see.
And so the program is actually oversubscribed. So we have the caseloads are larger than they should be, and we have people on waiting lists. But it is everything that you talked about and more. It's a fantastic program. It's just that we don't have the resources to offer to more people. And so that's what really.
So it's like a bandwidth challenge, like
Right.
to oversee that many,
Yeah.
because it's a manual intervention
Well, it's
that
just
has to be done.
we just would need, like, let's say that the council said we love the FSS program and we want you to double it. And so we're going to give you $170,000 to hire 2 more staffers.
Okay.
We would say, okay.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, that pretty much answers all my questions. I just think, I'm gonna just tell you what I think about this agency. I feel like, as goes the housing authority, so goes Birmingham. And, many of our neighborhoods have challenges because you're there, but we also you also represent the biggest redevelopment opportunity those neighborhoods have ever seen. So it's like, it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's like if they are not successful in doing what they need to do in resetting their portfolio, some of our neighborhoods will be stuck in weak market conditions forever, possibly, or for a long time. But, if you're successful, it sort of frees those, people to live in nicer housing, and the poverty to be less concentrated, as we sort of get, create these more mixed income settings, just healthier environments, more, vitality and everything we want. But it's like, we're in this together, so.
I think it's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I really realized or thought about it in that context that, the Housing Authority is a redevelopment authority. And, the even bigger thing is that they have bonding capacity. So.
They could.
Right. Yeah, so, taken together, I'm imagining HABD kind of taking on that same role that Woodlawn United is trying to do in that community. I mean, just if you start imagining the possibilities, it could be huge. I did want to ask you, just out of curiosity, do you guys maintain a waiting list for folks who have applied for housing choice vouchers?
Yeah, that waiting list is either 34, 3,500 people right now.
3,500.
Yeah.
And there's, for HABD, there's 6,000 out there.
Right. Well, that's our capacity. So we have a number of vouchers that we can utilize, but we also have funding restrictions or constrictions. And so we're only funded for the vouchers that we use. And so right now we're at like 5,900, 5,800. So we can go up kind of slowly and HUD will, let's say we spend on 5,900 vouchers in July, then in August they'll fund us for all those. So we have to kind of gradually work our way up, but that's what we're doing. We're issuing voucher, we're pulling people off the wait list. And that, compared to other housing authorities our size, it's a really small waiting list, which is helpful because in a way, people have short times to wait, but we also hope that they're still interested, because sometimes people get on wait lists, and by the time they get called, they're no longer interested. But we did a lot of work to pull them off, to evaluate them and everything like that. And so, probably, I could see us opening the wait list sometime next year. I wouldn't guarantee it, but it's possible, depending on how many families we kind of go through this year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked is I think that's important because it's a sort of an indicator of the need.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And the lesson I'll say is based on income, another 8,000 or so households in Birmingham are eligible for our program. So above the 5,000 we had in the voucher program, almost 6,000 and 4,000. There's another 8,000 that are just income eligible that we aren't able to serve.
Yeah. So another 8,000 that are somehow or another just scraping by.
Yes.
Probably living with family or something like that.
You're making under 50% of the median income, which is not for the city, for the whole region, the Birmingham metro area, which is $90,000. So you're making under 50% of that. You're eligible.
So is that 8,000 individuals or 8,000 households?
8,000 households.
Households.
Yeah, so 20,000 maybe on depending on the household size.
Okay. Mr. Embry, we'd like to thank you for being here with us and giving us this information. We definitely have our marching orders on some different things that we can help do to support HABD. And we definitely thank you for being an asset to this city. So without further ado, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And we are currently adjourned. Well, I guess I should have said this first. So the next Housing Policy Committee will be on Tuesday, July the 18th. Items for the agenda must be submitted by Wednesday, July 12th, 2023 by 4 p.m. to terry.chapman@birminghamal.gov. Now, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Yeah, so moved.
Second. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.